Good evening, everyone. I am RCDSO Registrar and CEO Dan Faulkner, and with me is RCDSO President Sandy Venditti. I want to welcome you to our third virtual member town hall, RCDSO Connect. I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules to hear directly from me, Sandy, and others on some really important issues. We built this session around topics that we think all dentists are interested in: record keeping and patient communications, our quality assurance program, and ways that you can help us fulfill our mandate. We want to connect with dentists newer to practice in the province. And with that in mind, we focused our first stage of marketing on that group, as well as our fourth-year dental students at Western and the University of Toronto. Tonight, our aim is to keep all of you informed and to address many of the questions you submitted through the event registration. With that, I will pass things over to Sandy.
Thank you, Dan. So to begin, as RCDSO President, I would like to recognize the complexity and privilege of gathering online today by sharing a land acknowledgement from the Government of Canada. We acknowledge that we are joining this meeting from the traditional territories of many nations, and that these lands are home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I invite us all to recognize the traditional territories of the lands from which we are joining this meeting. Dan?
Thank you, Sandy. On September 30th, we recognized National Day for Truth and Reconciliation by closing our office to give our staff an opportunity to reflect on and learn about the victims and survivors of residential schools, as well as their communities. We feel this is an important part of the reconciliation process. We'd like to get this event started by asking all of you a couple of questions. We always look forward to hearing from our participants, and to do that, we use a live polling tool called Slido. So on your smartphone, your computer, or tablet, open your web browser. You can see the instructions on the screen. Go to www.slido.com and enter the event code, and that is 955-8377. Alternatively, you can scan the QR code on screen to participate. We're going to be polling you on a number of issues this evening. Let's get started with our first question. So the first question is, what did you find most challenging in your first few years of practicing in Ontario? So you can enter your responses, words, sentences. We'll give that a minute or so. We'll see some images come up on the screen. Okay, so we're starting to see some words populate the screen. The fee guide was a challenge. The business aspect of dentistry, documenting, record keeping, we'll talk about that tonight. Defensive practice and fear of not trying. Work-life balance, great responses. Another business aspect to the practice. Student loans, yes, that's obviously a big one for those graduating. So that's great. You can keep typing your responses. We will be able to consolidate all the answers. We will not lose these responses, and we'll look to ways to report out on what we get at the end of the event, and we'll provide the responses subsequently as well. I'm going to turn now to a second question. And this is the flip side from the challenges. What did you find most rewarding in your first few years of practicing in Ontario? So again, we'll give you about 45 seconds or so. Patient care. Great. Helping patients, treating patients, independence. Sorry to hear that there's a nothing on the screen. Patient responses, appreciation, gratitude, money, experience, learning how to be a dentist. Well, that's great. Again, keep those responses coming, and we will make sure that the tally is created from them. And for this next poll, we wanted to gain a little bit of insight into how you perceived your first few years of practice in comparison to your expectations. So the question as you see it is, were your first few years of practice as you expected? So I'm seeing about 15 responses now. Hopefully the Slido application is working very easily for you. 29 responses. So right now, 40% were saying, no, it wasn't what you expected. Yes, but I was unprepared is the second highest response. Thankfully, there's a very small number that of those who felt completely unprepared. So 35 responses, just in the interest of time. Feel free to continue to populate that question, and we'll move on and we'll come back to the polling questions at a later time. Thanks again. And with that, I will pass things back to Sandy.
Thank you, Dan. So I'd like to take a few minutes to share a few highlights from our recent September 15th council meeting. We had a very full agenda. Council discussed and voted on the college's new 2023 to 2025 strategic plan and the $485 annual membership fee increase. We consulted with several groups over the summer on the new strategic plan, including Ontario dentists, and we received more than 1,100 responses. So thank you everyone who participated in this consultation. Some key areas of focus in the strategic plan include stakeholder engagement, access to care, practice models and quality of care, COVID-19 and emergency preparedness, and environmental sustainability. You can read the full plan on the RCDSO website. You can also learn more about the rationale and in-depth analysis that went into the $485 annual membership fee increase. Raising fees is never an easy decision. We know that inflation, staffing issues, and rising costs to maintain IPAC standards and purchase equipment are real issues for all of us. That's why in 2021, we decided to hold fees steady for 1 year in response to these hardships faced by the pandemic. Most of the increase will go to manage costs related to our professional liability program. For the past 5 years, this has been our biggest area of cost growth. And of the new annual fee, which is now $2,995, $1,000 will go directly to manage PLP costs. The college works hard to control budgets in all areas, but unfortunately, we cannot control what happens with PLP. The costs are primarily driven by external forces, and this impacts the college's financial position and our ability to fulfill our legislated regulatory programs. So for more information on our September council meeting, visit our website to read the council highlights. You can also watch a recording of our council meeting on our YouTube channel. And lastly, our annual membership renewal is now open. So you can renew your certificate through the RCDSO member portal. Our staff have created several resources to help you renew, including a step-by-step renewal guide and a number of frequently asked questions. If you had any technical issues or additional questions, you can reach out directly to the college by emailing info@rcdso.org, and staff will do their very best to help you. Back over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Sandy. We're now going to move on to a presentation from one of the college's practice advisors, Dr. Vicki Nguyen. Vicki will focus on a couple of important topics that were raised in some of the earlier polling questions, what to expect in your first years of practice, and a discussion about the importance of record keeping and professional patient communications.
So before we start, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. So my name is Vicky Nguyen. I'm a dentist and a registered member of the college. I joined the RCDSO in 2012, and I currently serve as a practice advisor in the communications department. And in addition to my role in the practice advisory service, I also provide one-on-one courses in dental record keeping and informed consent to members as part of their specified continuing education and remedial program or SCRP requirement. And before the pandemic started, I had the opportunity to act as a monitoring officer for the college on issues relating to record keeping and informed consent. So tonight I'll take about 15 minutes of your time to talk about dental record keeping. And I know it's not the most exciting topic. As dentists, you didn't go to dental school to become expert at taking notes. You did your dental degree because you wanted to provide the best procedures and the best dental care to your patients, and that's understandable. So when I give this record keeping course with my colleagues to members, the type of comments that we usually hear are, well, record keeping takes too much time. I don't have time. I'd rather spend my time doing dentistry. Usually my records are excellent, but for some reason things just slip. Or record keeping is so tedious, like, why do we need to do this? And so if we go back to the fundamentals and examine the reason for keeping good patient records, like, why do we need to do this? Well, the first reason is the legal reason. And there is a section in the professional misconduct regulation that states that failing to keep records as required by the regulation is professional misconduct. So dentists are required by law to maintain adequate patient records. So that's the legal reason. But it's not the only reason, and it's not the real reason. So the real reason for keeping good records is actually that you need to ensure safe treatment of the patient and continuity of care, which means that, okay, if for some reason tomorrow you can't treat the patient and they have to go see another dentist, well, that next dentist, just by looking at your records, will be able to reconstruct exactly what was done to the patient and what needs to be done next. So they will be able to jump in safely and continue to treat the patient right where you left. So it's a fundamental professional and ethical responsibility. It's a duty of care that we owe to our patients. So we've talked about the legal reason. We've talked about the real reason. And now there's another reason, and I'm going to call that the selfish reason. And that's because you may need to rely on your records to defend yourself during a lawsuit or a college investigation. So we know that there's a limitation period to a patient to commence legal action, but there's actually no time limit for a patient to file a complaint at the college. And memory fades over time. I mean, that's just human nature. We know that. So if a patient decides to file a complaint, let's say 8 years down the road, it would be difficult to rely on your memory for an accurate recollection of the events. So the written documentation is the most reliable evidence of what happened during that patient interaction. And also, some surveys have shown that professional liability insurance companies have stated that the errors or the inadequacies in the patient records have prevented them from successfully defending some dentists against unfounded allegations of malpractice. And I think the key word here to remember is unfounded allegations, right? Which means that even if the lawyers thought that, okay, the claim had no merit, they didn't feel confident enough to go to court to defend the dentists because they had poor records. And because of that, they may be forced to settle out of court. And also interesting to know that in 2022, so this year, of all the ICRC decisions that were issued, approximately 10% of them had a record-keeping remediation component as part of the outcome. So you know, we can say that 10% is not like an alarming number, but it's also not an insignificant number, considering that this is purely a non-clinical issue that can be easily improved. So the most common record keeping errors that we see at the college are incomplete medical history review. We see a lot of failure to document a clear diagnosis and treatment plan. We see failure to document the rationale for providing treatment, lack of documentation for informed consent or informed refusal. We also see missing entries, inadequate entries. So basically things that should have been in the records but are missing, things like material, technique, odontogram, perio charts, and sometimes we even see inappropriate entries. So things that are in the record but should not have been there in the first place. So things like derogatory remarks about a patient, negative comments about another colleague, conversation with PLP, conversation with practice advisory. So if you want to keep records of these discussions, you can do that as a separate record, but these discussions should definitely not be in the patient's permanent clinical records. So the college has produced these dental guidelines that details all the components of a patient record. And there are 2 companion documents to the dental record keeping guidelines. So we have the medical history record keeping guidelines, the electronic record management guidelines, and these are all available on our website under the section standards, guidelines, and advisory. So I would invite you to review them or at least to refer to them if and when needed. So a lot of you have sent questions in advance, and thank you for that. I mean, they are very relevant and practical questions, and I'd like to address some of them as we go along. And so this is a question from a member. So should dentists sign and seal their notes? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So for electronic records, the entries should be signed, locked, and each provider should have a unique password protected login or username. And that's really how you ensure the authenticity and integrity of your entries. And once the entries are sealed or locked, well, no one, including yourself, should be able to go back and alter the notes, because altering records is about the worst thing that dentists can do to damage their defense in a malpractice claim or a college investigation, right? So if you made a mistake or forgot to write something important, don't go back and change the records. I mean, just make an amendment or add a note referring to the original entry. Now, we have some other questions from members on the topic of informed consent. And this is the member is asking, if the patient is informed of the risk and accepts them, do they have to sign a form, or is a note in the chart acceptable? And also, does the RCDSO have consent forms to share? So the first answer is yes, verbal consent documented in the progress note can be acceptable in many situations, but if you're doing more risky, invasive, expensive, or elective procedures, then you should really consider having a well-drafted consent form. Now, not all consent forms are created equal. I mean, there are these blanket consent forms that try to cover almost everything. So they're really too generic or too vague. These forms will actually carry less credibility. So if you want to use a solid consent form, it has to be patient specific and it has to be procedure specific. And the second answer to the question is no, the college does not have a library of all the different types of consent forms, because there's just so many procedures. But if you call the practice advisory service, we can provide you with templates and checklists that will remind you of all the elements that should be included on your form. So now, who's responsible for the informed consent process? So is the patient responsible for understanding, or is the dentist responsible for explaining? And well, the Healthcare Consent Act puts the onus on the healthcare provider, so basically on us, the dentists, to make sure that the patient understands. So as you can see, the success of the informed consent process really depends on the dentist's communication skills. So while we are on the topic of communication, I just want to say that at the college, we found that there are many reasons why a patient can file a complaint to the college that have little to do with the actual quality of the dentistry provided, but have much to do with the patient's perception of how they've been cared for. So the college has this practice advisory document on maintaining a professional patient-dentist relationship, and it provides guidance and helpful tips on how to de-escalate a potential conflict with a patient. So if you have any questions, if you want to discuss further, feel free to call the Practice Advisory Service. I mean, our assistance in practice advisory is mostly effective before a complaint is lodged, before a lawsuit is launched, and that's when things like prevention, risk management, damage control can make a whole difference on the final outcome of the case. Now, in the interest of time, I can only answer 2 more questions. So we have a member here asking, how long do we need to keep these records before we can destroy them? And the answer is, for an adult patient, the retention period is 10 years from the date of the last entry. And for minors, well, the rule is 10 years from the date that the patient reaches the age of 18. So the rule applies to all clinical, financial, and administrative records. And once the retention period has passed, you can start to safely destroy the records. And in the destruction process, just make sure that your patient's confidential information is protected at all times. So that's really important. And then lastly, well, we have a member asking, record keeping is an important part of dentistry. What can I do to stay current? Why are these sessions not more frequently available? What can the RCDSO do to keep them easily accessible? So we do give these record keeping remedial courses at the college for members that went through the complaint process, but if you don't have a matter with the college and you still want to take these courses on a proactive basis, while every year we give it at the ODA spring meeting, we also go to component societies, study clubs. So if you're part of such club or society, you can make a request to the college. We can deliver it to you as a Category 1 course, either virtually or in person. And we also reach out to students at dental faculties before they even enter the profession, because these are the future generations of dentists that will drive this profession one day. And then finally, well, if you don't have time to take courses at all, you can go to our website. In addition to the guidelines that I've mentioned before, we have a lot of resources on record keeping, like FAQs, RCDSO news articles. So I really wanted to thank you for all the excellent questions that we didn't have a chance to address tonight. This is the end of my 15 minutes, but the conversation does not have to stop here. If you reach out to the Practice Advisory Service, our whole team is going to be there to assist you, and we'll take the time to address each one of your questions in more detail. So on this note, I just wanted to say thank you, and we hope to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Vicki. That was an excellent presentation, very informative. So as many of you know, this year is another election year for the RCDSO Council. Our election candidate application period closed in late September, with an exception for a by-election in District 9. So online voting for our next council starts at the end of November. You will receive an email ballot from Big Pulse, and they are the independent company that administers the online election. So be on the lookout for that, and please cast your vote. Now, our non-council committee appointment process is underway, and applications for that are due on November the 14th. You can find more information on the application process and eligibility requirements on our website and through our social media channels. In addition to council and committee work, there are also other ways to get involved with the college, and these include inspectors with their facility inspection program, monitoring officers who work with our professional conduct and regulatory affairs department, and also engaging with us on social media and in our consultation process on items like our strategic plan and fee increase. So before we start our next session, we have another poll for you. We will have the poll up on the screen momentarily. Okay, and the question is, what are some barriers to getting involved with the college? So I'll give you a couple of minutes here and see what we come up with. Time, yes, that is a big one. Location, these are all great responses, and we will be addressing these. Onerous application process, okay. Time. The good thing with virtual is it helps with the distance. We don't do much traveling these days, so that's very helpful. Remuneration, lost revenue, not knowing what's involved. Well, we'll get the answers to that tonight, and I think that will shed some light on these positions. So these are all great responses, and thank you for that. So to help you to understand what's involved in working with the college, we'll now play a short video featuring inspectors, monitoring officers, and committee members, and they'll share their experiences and talk about what this work means to them, to the profession and the public, and it will actually answer some of these answers that you populated on the screen. So the video is about 6.5 minutes long, so sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hello everyone, my name is Sonika Singhal. I'm a dental public health specialist working as assistant professor and program director of dental public health discipline at Faculty of Dentistry, University of Toronto.
Hi, I'm Susan Sutherland. I graduated from dentistry at University of Toronto in 1984, so I've been around for a long time. I spent my entire career at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre in Toronto, where I was chief of dentistry for almost 20 years.
My name is Dr. Adrian Musters. I'm a general dentist. I have a busy practice that I sold about 5 years ago in Huntsville, Ontario, about 2.5 hours north of Toronto. I work as a practice monitor for the college. I've been doing that 2 or 3 years now. I'm married, I have 3 wonderful kids and 4 great-grandchildren.
My name is David Siegel. I'm an oral maxillofacial surgeon. I started practice in Toronto area in 1982. And I joined council in 2011 as a counselor.
So to ensure the preservation of self-regulation, it's so important that dentists are involved in college matters. For me, committee work was the role that best suited me. I have a lot of experience on committees, and I just wanted to get involved in a way that helped support the college and its mission.
I was approached by a former counselor who was going off council and suggested I run for council as he thought I would be a good fit. So I did, and I found it just to be a wonderful experience to just get to see what's going on from the other side.
I thought of being a member of Quality Assurance Committee of the college, where I can review what kind of initiatives are being taken at the college and how I can support in any way in those functionings. And in this way, I would be able to contribute to the profession as well. So that's what motivated me to join the college.
I strongly believe that you have to give back to what's given life to you, and dentistry certainly been very, very good to me.
Initially, when I was more in full-time practice, it was more of a challenge, but I would allow myself a day or two or sometimes three days a month for meetings and committee work.
My power tool is my phone. I use the calendar for everything professional and personal. I create lists and set up reminders, and I make sure my phone is backed up to my computer, because if I lose my phone, I lose the the balance in my whole life.
For the QA committee, there are 6 meetings in a year. So all the schedule is developed in advance, so then you can plan, the other responsibilities for the rest of the year. So it becomes quite easy that way.
And the time commitment's really not horrible. It's quite manageable.
The other is when I work with the dentists, I find that, I was a general dentist. I can understand exactly where people are coming from. And I really enjoy working with the dentists who are invested in making their practices better. That's really where I get most of my enjoyment from.
It really gives you a different perspective and an opportunity to provide a practicing dentist perspective to those on the regulatory side.
So I would have to say there's a real opportunity for personal growth doing this work. The guidance and support of the college, legal team and staff, the continuing education provided to committee members, and the opportunity to work with remarkable colleagues are very rewarding.
I see knowledge enrichment. Being at the center of the policy and processes, it gives me opportunity to learn and grow.
We can always learn, and we learn from each other. I as well, from the people I do inspections with or I talk to.
For dentists, I would say it's your profession, get involved. Don't leave it to someone else. That someone else may not step up, and we need to be vigilant in protecting the trust that we've been given to regulate ourselves.
Sure, I would definitely encourage dentists of Ontario to work for the college. Depending on how much time do they have, they can be involved in various capacities. There are a number of committees of the college where they can serve.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity, as I said in a previous question, to see what's going on in the regulatory side and get yourself out of the little box that we're often in when we're practicing dentistry. And understand that some of the decisions that are being made that affect the way we practice, there's legitimate reasons and concerns about why these suggestions or restrictions or standards or guidelines are there. And you have a better understanding and a better appreciation. And I think it also helps you treat your patients better. And probably to your dental colleagues, discuss things with them and give them some education as well.
The one piece of advice I would give is that if you want to make the college or your profession better, get involved in it. Do something meaningful that uses your unique skill sets, your ideas, your interests to make your profession better. And the only way to do that is to get involved.
So thank you for that. I hope that hearing from those currently involved in some very important roles will inspire you to also get involved with us. So now I would like to introduce Dana Simon, our Senior Counsel with our Professional Conduct and Regulatory Affairs, and Dan Faulkner, Registrar and CEO, who will give an overview of how the non-council committee appointment process works. Dan and Dana will also discuss the type of work committee members are involved in. Over to you.
Thanks, Sandy. And before I turn over to Dana, I just want to give you 3 quick reasons why it's so important for members of the profession to be considering roles within the college, whether it's council, non-council committee appointments, practice monitors, or any of the others. Number one is, some would say that this is where professional regulation is actually the most alive. This is where you bring your expertise, you bring your body of knowledge, you bring practice context and nuances, and you balance that with public input to make the best decisions for the college, whether that be complaints, quality assurance, licensure, or others. The second reason is we need diverse perspectives. We need to advance our commitment as an organization to equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything that we do. So we're looking for broad representation from the profession, and that representation may be based on geographical location, specialty, gender, sexual identity, racialized individuals. We need that to make the best decisions. And finally, the third reason is it's a demonstration of our transparency. We're not a closed shop. We have many committees that already have non-council committee members. And this year we are adding non-council committee members to the registration committee and the finance, audit, and risk committee. And hopefully this will be a demonstration of how the decision-making in the college works around various tables. Dana, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Dan. We can go to the first slide. That'd be great. So as you heard Sandy say, the application for non-council committee members is posted on our website. And please go in and check it out. What you would do is put it in the application. We are looking for about 25 to 30 committee members, and there are a variety of committees that you can serve on. I did see some people talk about why they were hesitant. There was the time commitment. The committees range. Some committees meet, 3 to 4 times in a year, and some may meet, 2 to 3 times in a month. So you do get to express on your application which committees you are most interested in, and there are places for you to describe, your availability. And one person said that the application seemed onerous, and I do think it is new this year. It will probably take about 2 hours to do the application and the course that goes with it, but it's a real time investment of being able to show your skills, your perspective, and what you would be interested in, so we can best match people with the committees for their skills and their interests. So it's a small time investment up front of maybe a couple of hours that may lead to a 2-year term appointment. So hopefully you'll have a bit of fun with the application and think a bit. And I have heard people describe their committee work as a real professional highlight. I think people are really surprised how much they enjoy it, and getting to engage with the other committee members, public members. It is a competency-based application process. So you are invited to rank yourself on different skills and competencies and to answer some questions. Next slide. As Dan said, many of our committees have non-council committee members on them. Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee, that is our largest committee. I think right now there's about 17 non-council committee dentists on it, so quite large. It's also the largest time commitment. With that committee, you may spend an average of about 2 days in a 6-week period. The Discipline Committee, that is, you sit in hearings almost like a judge. That is a committee that it may meet several days in a row, and then for many months you may not be called on for a hearing. The Fitness to Practice Committee has some overlap in appointment with the Discipline Committee because they are related. Those are for incapacity hearings. It does not meet frequently. For the first time this year, the Registration Committee is going to have a non-council committee member. It's going to be one person. And the same with the Finance, Audit, and Risk Committee. the Quality Assurance Committee, which also includes the Dental, CT Scanner, and Sedation and General Anesthesia Committees. That has 2 people, and you heard Dr. Single expressing her participation and feedback on that committee. Patient Relations Committee usually takes about 2 people. And the PLP Committee, it's a little bit different than some of the other committees. And I think that typically has about 4 or 5 people. Committees where it would be a lesser time commitment, I would say probably the Registration Committee, the Patient Relations Committee, Quality Assurance, PLP. So there is a large variety of interests and skills, and we really encourage people to come out and do what they're interested in doing. The application is due by November 14th at 9 a.m. Part of what you have to do is the orientation module. It helps ensure that you know what you're signing up for and that it's a good match, and will help you answer some of the questions on the application form as well. That has to be submitted by 9 a.m. and you have to verify that you've completed the course by clicking a button. Please be familiar with eligibility requirements and conflicts of interest. We do ask those questions on the form. For example, if you are involved on the ODA board, for example, that would be a conflict of interest. If you have questions and you want to know if any organizations or boards that you're involved with might be a conflict of interest before you invest the time in the application, you can email the college staff at elections@rcdso.org, and hopefully we can let you know if we think that there could be an issue with any of your current involvement or anything you've been involved with in the past 3 years, because there is a cooling off period from association work to college work. So I also want to say about the time commitment, because I think in the word cloud, some people said distance to travel to Toronto was a factor. Most meetings will be virtual. I think the exception may be some contested discipline hearings, and there may be 1 or 2 in-person or hybrid training sessions in a year. But I think in an effort to increase efficiencies and really to get more participation across the province, it's been a bit of a side effect of how we went virtual in the pandemic to be able to allow people to really participate from anywhere in Ontario and not have to incur that travel time. So almost all the meetings are virtual. And somebody else said that there was a lack of compensation. There is a per diem provided for participation. So there is compensation. It may not be the same as a day working in the office as a dentist, but there is compensation for your time. Just a very short bit about the selection process. Applications close November 14th. You will find out if you were appointed in January after the council meets. The nominations committee makes recommendations after reviewing all of the applications. And we usually do get quite a number of applications, more applications than there are positions. And we'll make a recommendation to council. Council will make those appointments in January, and we'll let people know right after the council meeting in January, which is January 19th. Please look for more information. It's on our website, on our social media. There's more information on the website about the time commitments, about what those different committees do. There's not time tonight to explain what each of these committees do, but there is more information about the role of the committees and the time commitment on the website. And if you have questions, please email us at elections@rcdso.org. This application form is for the non-council committee members. For the monitoring officers, like Dr. Musters that you heard from, that is not done through this application. You would email info@rcdso.org for more information if you're interested in that type of role. So thank you so much for your time tonight. And I hope the applications start flying in after tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dana. That was great. I'm going to turn it back over to Sandy now to move us to the next section.
Thank you, Dan and Dana. Excellent presentation. So I'd like now to introduce our final session for this evening and welcome the college's Director of Quality, Susan Taylor. Susan will provide an overview of the QA program, including the ePortfolio and practice enhancement tool, and talk about why the program is vital to the practice of dentistry. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Dr. Venditti. So we're just pulling up slides. So we can go to the next slide, please. Section of tonight's agenda is really about our quality assurance program, including continuing education. A number of you shared questions in advance, and we hope that over the next 15 minutes that we'll be able to address many of these. This particular session will help you describe the purpose of the QA program and how it acts as a bridge between the requirements you have as an individual professional and that you and your colleagues have as dental professionals as a whole. We'll identify the elements of the QA program as they are defined within the Quality Assurance Regulation of the Dentistry Act, and we'll identify factors for you to consider as you assess your compliance with the QA program and plan your development activities. Next slide, please. But why is quality assurance important? One of the things that we wanted to do just to start us off is to think a little bit about what your experience has been like since you first made the decision that you're going to apply to dental school. So think back to when you were applying for university and remember, what were you hoping to achieve? What drove your aspirations to be a dentist? Remember learning in lectures and then having the opportunity to practice? Remember how nervous you were with your first real patient and how you felt by the time you graduated? Remember how proud you were of your accomplishments and how secure you felt in the knowledge that what you had was up to the moment and based on the very best available evidence at the time. Next, please. Now fast forward a year, 2 years, 5 years, and then, based on my own experience in the professional world, before you know it, it's 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. You're in practice, you're caring for people who have put their trust in you to care for them. How do you know what you're doing is keeping up with the best available evidence? How do you know that your patients have outcomes that are the best they can possibly be? We know that there's new evidence emerging all the time. There's new standards of practice, new advances in technology, and modernized expectations for competencies required to practice. You're busy, and how can you possibly keep up? Next, please. And that's where the college comes in. We can help. What we can do through our quality assurance program is help you to see how you're doing, to follow through with activities that will make a difference in your practice. Go to the next slide, please. We help by producing standards that summarize the best available evidence so that you can deliver high quality care. We support implementation through programs like the Facilities Inspection Program for sedation and CT scanning. Our quality assurance program includes elements that help you assess your clinical practice and identify your strengths and opportunities for growth that you can incorporate into your continuing education. Your journey of continuous learning and development increases your expertise and allows you to establish and sustain trusting relationships with your patients. At the same time, the college plays a role in building public trust in the profession as a whole. The RCDSO is one of the health regulatory colleges in the province with the responsibility and the authority to protect the rights of patients. Patients must be able to put their trust in you as their dentist. When a patient comes into your office, they expect a trained, registered professional to provide safe, ethical treatment and the highest standard of care. It is our responsibility to ensure you maintain the necessary knowledge, skill, and ability to do just that. And we're here to help. When you think about the care you provide, think about how you know the treatment plan you've put together will make a difference for your patient. These are the interventions that you know to be effective. When your patient comes into the office, how are you working with your dental assistant, dental hygienist, treatment coordinator, receptionist, and other members of your team to make the best use of everybody's skill set? By practicing efficiently, you'll optimize the capacity of your office to provide timely care. How do you ensure that you're communicating with your patients in ways that they understand and with the clarity that they need to make informed decisions? By ensuring your approach is clear, you can increase safety and ensure your care is patient-centered. How do you embed equity into the care you provide? When you incorporate ethical decision-making into your practice, you will increase your ability to deliver to your patients the care they need in the way they want. What we've just described are the dimensions of quality. Care that is patient-centered, safe, timely, effective, efficient, and equitable. That's high-quality care. The Quality Assurance Program at the college looks at these dimensions of quality and looks at how to support dentists to deliver the highest standard of care to each and every patient, each and every time. So let's pause for a moment now and think a little bit about how you've maintained your ability to provide the best possible care for your patients. And we'll start with a poll. On the next slide, please. What we'd like you to do is just take a moment and enter in how you choose your continuing education. Choose a response that best describes your choice. It might be that many of them are applicable, but pick the one that best describes. There's no right or wrong answer. So we'll just take a minute for this. So we're seeing lots of people who are commenting that it's a topic that's relevant to their practice, but we are seeing some very practical aspects as well. We're seeing some people who are picking courses and practices or programs that are convenient and economical, and that it gives the points that they need in the category that they need. Very practical reasons, but certainly lots leaning towards the relevance to practice. So please continue to respond to that poll if you haven't already, but we'll move to the next slide, please. Okay. So let's think a little bit. We're going to dig in now to the Quality Assurance Program and the elements of it that are described in the regulation of the Dentistry Act. If you haven't reviewed this regulation, I really do encourage you to do so because it lays everything out in detail for you. I do want to take a moment to point out that it is the responsibility of every member who holds a general or a specialty certificate of registration to participate in the Quality Assurance Program. This means that every single dentist who's practicing in Ontario needs to engage in all three elements. So we'll talk first about the continuing education element and thinking about what does this mean? So we have that minimum of 90 points over 3 years with some category 1, some category 2, and some category 3. The cycle begins when you begin your first or when you are first registered with the college. So we're going to pop to the next slide just for a moment, please. Okay. And so what you'll see if you go to our website is you'll see a page that's called Continuing Education and ePortfolio. And what it does is it walks through how you can interpret the various categories of courses. For category 1, you'll find that there's courses that are delivered by what's called an approved sponsor, and they're on a clinical topic, and that they've been reviewed and approved by the college's QA committee. And that's what constitutes a category 1 course with category 1 points. Category 2 courses are also delivered by an approved sponsor on a clinical topic, but they haven't been reviewed by the college, by the college's QA committee. So those are category 2. Other category 2 points can be achieved through things like teaching in dentistry, dental hygiene or level 2 dental assistance, authorship of an article in a peer-reviewed journal, or attendance at rounds or other clinical courses. Category 3 activities are things like journal reading, attendance at non-clinical seminars, or sessions that are being delivered by somebody other than approved sponsors. As you can see, and I suspect that many of you have experienced, it's really complicated to understand which category your points fall into, and to be sure that the category you think they are is actually validated. At the present time, our ePortfolio platform doesn't allow for that real-time feedback, and this is an issue for our members and our registrants. We are working on that, and moving into the spring of 2023, we'll be actively launching a new platform, and we're excited to say that this new platform will be simplified and will include some automation that will provide you with that real-time or close to real-time validation of points. You'll be able to download a transcript at the end of your cycle, summarize the competencies that you've studied. We'll also be providing you with some reminders throughout your 3-year cycle with key times when they're coming due, and allow you to have that ability to see the program at a glance. And finally, This is going to give us a source of information so that we can identify some of the competency areas that don't have a lot of options for Category 1 courses, so that we can actively seek partners to create and develop those courses for you. So we'll go back to the previous slide now, please. Okay. So now let's move on to the second element. The second element is that annual declaration. This is what happens each year when you do the renewal of your registration with the college. There's a question in there that confirms your obligation to be compliant with the QA program. And this is an area that we believe is often misunderstood for a couple of reasons. One is that it's a 3-year cycle, and so sometimes people answer that question as no, they're not compliant because they haven't completed all of the points required for their cycle. And we just want to point out, we've added some clarification to this year's renewal to say that if you haven't completed all of the points now, but it's your intention to complete them all by the end of the cycle, then you should answer yes. Similarly, if you haven't yet completed the practice enhancement tool in this cycle, but it is your intention to do it when it becomes your turn, then you should answer that question yes. So that is an area that we know to be a little bit confusing, and we want to be sure that we clarify that however we can. And then finally, the third element is the practice enhancement tool. After 5 years in practice and every 5 years thereafter, all dentists must complete this assessment. This serves as a way for you to assess your knowledge and understand, how you're doing in the competency areas that are required for you as a dentist. There are 15 competency areas, and each cycle addresses 6 competency areas. There's 2 versions of the test, one for generalists and one for specialists, and each test includes 200 multiple choice questions, and the dentist has 30 days to complete the assessment. You can log on as many times as you want during that 30 days, and then you can be satisfied with your choices before you submit. We're currently in our 2nd cycle, and we're working towards being prepared to launch the 3rd cycle in 2024. And during that time, we'll be making some adjustments to improve the member experience based on some of the feedback that we've received. And go to the next slide, please. So we've spoken a little bit about the quality assurance program at the college, and let's think now to the future and how you might use your quality assurance program to help guide the plan that you have for your professional development. Some of the things that you might want to consider as you're developing your learning goals is and identifying activities that address these needs might include your PET assessment results, identifying the areas where you've done well and the areas that have been more of a struggle, and how you might challenge yourself to learn more where there's been the biggest gap. You might want to look at what are some of the new standards of practice that have been released by the college, or existing standards that perhaps you're not as familiar with, and how you might learn more about these so that you can incorporate this evidence into your practice. You may want to think about some of the principles of dentistry and kind of go back to basics. So think about the things like ethics, communication skills, and record keeping that are foundational elements. It's easy to slip into shortcuts, so it can be helpful from time to time to take a pause and go back and review those. If you are authorized under the facilities inspection program, you'll want to include in your requirements the renewal aspects that are required for continuing education, because these are part of your 90 points. And then finally, going back to those dimensions of quality and thinking about how you might improve the care for your patient through activities that help you strengthen care in one or more of these areas. The other consideration would be around pacing. I do want to encourage you to think about where you are in your 3-year cycle. If you're early in your cycle and you're tracking well towards your 90 points, then you might be quite content at the pace you're at. If you're finding you're lagging a little bit behind, you might need to increase a little bit. Or if you're a little bit ahead, then that might give you a bit of a reprieve and give you a little bit more time. You may also want to think about any big commitments that you have or you foresee in your personal or professional future. So if you anticipate that next year you're going on the trip of a lifetime for 2 months, then you might want to get a little bit ahead in your continuing education. Or if you're planning a move of office, those sorts of things, then you might want to do that as well. Something to just balance some of the demands on your time. So we'll move to the next steps, please, or the next slide. So what's next for us? And I've spoken to these, but in the current time frame, we have adjusted the clarifying language with our annual declaration. So we encourage you to read that carefully as you're doing your renewal. In the spring of 2023, we'll be launching our e-portfolio new platform and actively seeking developers for some of those Category 1 courses that don't have a lot of topics available in them. And then coming into 2024, we'll be looking to release the third iteration of our PET, and we'll have some new questions for generalists and specialists, and we'll be proactively offering courses in areas that we know are challenging for our members. If we go to the next slide, please. And we do want to finish off with a bit of a poll. We want to ask you now, what is one thing that we could do at the college a little bit differently that would enhance your professional development or continuing education experience? So this is just a free text. So just type in, some of the ideas that you have, because we'll use this information to help us as we're developing plans for future going forward. As you're typing, I'm conscious of our time, and so I will thank you for your attention this evening, and hope that this presentation has answered some of your questions. We're always interested in a conversation, and if you'd like to follow up and speak with me directly, please email me at staylor@rcdso.org. And I'll hand back now to Dr. Venditti, and I will certainly be keeping an eye on these responses, because this will be important to us as we go forward.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was an excellent presentation, very informative. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to Vicki, to Dana, Susan Sutherland, David Siegel, Adrian Musters, and Sonika Single for participating in tonight's event.
I want to echo the appreciation to all of our participants. And I hope we answered many of your questions tonight, although I know we didn't answer them all. So as always, if you have any practice-related questions, please don't hesitate. Reach out to staff in the college's practice advisory service by email at practiceadvisory@rcdso.org. You can also follow the college on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram to receive all of our latest news, updates, and resources. We'll be sending you an evaluation survey about this evening's session. It's short and will help us understand how we can make future RCDSO Connect events more valuable for you. And I hope for return guests, you've seen how we have responded to some of the feedback that we've received over the last two events. Our latest college newsletter arrived in your mailbox earlier this month, and I hope you'll take the opportunity to read it and get more details on what your college is doing to meet our mandate to serve the public interest. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.